Hey everyone, welcome back to the Inside Podcast. I'm your host Seth, the CMO at Syte, and I'm joined by my co-host Mike, the CEO at Syte. Today we're diving into the nitty-gritty of Google Ads to help you get the most out of your campaigns. This is probably the most technical episode we've recorded yet, and it's packed with advanced techniques to maximize your Google Ads performance. In this episode, we'll explore server-side tracking, performance on ad spend targeting, and feed optimizations. By the end of this episode, you'll have a whole toolbox of new strategies to elevate your Google ad campaigns. Let's get started. Yeah, I think it's a great note just as we start this episode because it is so technical, just to disclose who this episode is for. So who should be paying attention and who should probably tune in next week?
So hopefully people enjoy it. Hopefully people get value. But I think the people that will get the most value are obviously e-commerce store owners, marketing managers, and so on, that have been running Google for an extended period of time and most likely running PMAX campaigns, and want to find more advanced techniques to scale their Google revenue.
Awesome. I think, just on that, let's dive right in because this is so technical, so I don't want to waste anyone's time.
At the start, Google Ads used to be search ads. So your normal Google ad where you see basically a blue link, or it was a blue link, and you see some text with a product name or other, and that's what Google Ads used to be for e-commerce. Then obviously display ads came along, and eventually we got to shopping ads. And shopping ads was the holy grail for e-commerce because it solved so many of Google Ads e-commerce problems in the sense that still you pay typically pay per click, but you could pre-vet the person coming to your store, and therefore you could pre-vet that click coming to your store by showing the product, what the product looks like to someone before they enter the store, so before it costs you money, and secondly, and most importantly, it showed you that the price of the product. So people that were not willing to pay for the product in terms of it was too expensive or it wasn't what they were expecting, didn't come to your store in the first place, and therefore they never cost you any money. So shopping ads was an amazing solve for e-commerce because it got you incredibly vetted traffic to your site. And when shopping started, it was standard shopping, and then it came along with smart shopping, and eventually got to pretty much where we are today with PMAX. And pretty much all campaigns, or most companies, I think, will run PMAX campaigns these days. And the beauty and the negative of PMAX campaigns for shopping is or for e-commerce stores, is PMAX is not purely shopping. It uses the whole, obviously, Google Ads inventory. So some of the portion of your spend is going to shopping campaigns, some is going to display, some is going to YouTube, some is going to search, and so on and so on. And the second, which is the pro and the con in one, but the second part of it is PMAX campaigns are intended by Google to make it easy for everyone to run Google campaigns. And for the most part, they do. And once you've been running it for a certain time, you can then input a certain ROAS. So you say, I want to get a certain return for my spend. So you can say I want a ROAS of 5-1, meaning that I'm going to put £1 or $1 or £1 in, and I expect to get £5 or rands or dollars out, depending on what your requirement is. And Google over time will enable your campaign to get there, basically using as big AI engine. And the higher the ROAS requirement you give it, usually that comes at the expense of volume. So if you say, well, I instead of getting a 5-1, why don't I get a 100-1 return? You can do that, but then there's that much less traffic out there at 100-1 return than there is to 5-1. So the higher the ROAS you push it, the lower the number of orders that come through. But for the most part, that's where people stopped learning how to do advanced techniques on Google. So people don't go much further than standard PMAX campaigns. At the best, they'll break it down into categories, and sometimes that's a bad approach, sometimes that's a good approach. But today, we're going to go through three techniques where once you've got to PMAX campaigns, or what's next, how do you get more juice out of your Google? And to your question, now we're on server-side tracking. And it's a good place to start. So because PMAX campaigns and because all paid media, and Google particularly, because we're speaking about that today, is very algorithm driven and very returns driven, meaning that you can say I want a 5-1 and it will over time with enough data figure out how to get you a 5-1 return. It's so important to make sure your fundamentals are in place. And so often people run campaigns without having their tracking being perfect. saying that if Google doesn't know what to optimize for, if it's not tracking your revenue perfectly, then it doesn't know, how to optimize. The whole engine is built on tracking. And what server-side tracking does, it prepares you well for the future. Because if people haven't noticed yet, I'm sure they'll notice it more and more as it becomes more common. But there's cookie requirements on websites, there's data privacy challenges, and that will just get more and more. People are now very resistant to give sites all their data and so on. So that makes tracking in general, and therefore running campaigns in general, that much more tricky. So what server-side tracking does, it essentially allows you to get the best data, even with, and it will use in some cases aggregate data, even with people that don't accept your cookies, even with people that have ad blockers on, even with people on iOS devices which don't want to share their data with you. Server-side tracking is really the solve to that. And there's no real downside. So the sooner stores migrate to server-side tracking, the better for, one, their data accuracy and integrity, and therefore the better for their performance of their campaigns.
Yeah, I think almost in summary, and the best way to say server-side tracking, and I think this is almost the thought that everyone needs to change in their mind, is that it's future-proofing your tracking. It's future-proofing my Google campaign, essentially.
Exactly. It's going to definitely become harder and harder to track people. The sooner one does
especially
it,
with
better.
privacy and Poppy and all of these acts acting against it, and everyone becoming so incredibly sensitive about all of their data being out there. You have to stay on top of what are the current trends in tracking in order to track correctly, especially when you are going down the route of I'm giving all of the algorithms a lot of say in how my campaign performs, because that's what these platforms are pushing for. And in order to do that, you have to enable them. And if you don't have the right setup, like a house, for example, if you have the wrong foundations, it's going to fall down sooner or later. And I think that kind of puts us in the perfect position, because once you've got your server-side tracking set up and you've got that foundation built, you can kind of then go and change your approach from a return on ad spend to a profit on ad spend approach. And that's exactly the next point I want to go into. Why profit over return?
Right. So the default on Google is when you have an optimization goal, you can choose typically to give you a certain ROAS or return on ad spend. And that's really a revenue return on ad spend, meaning that if you're going to get a 5-to-1 return, it's not a 5-to-1 in profit. It's meaning that for every one, whatever currency you're using, you're going to spend, you're going to get 5 out of it. But again, that's revenue. But what that discounts or doesn't take into account is that you might have a store, and you likely have a store where each product has a different profit margin. And you don't really want to bucket all your products as the same profit, as the same GP or the same profit margin. It's far better if you have one product with a 80% profit margin. It's far better to get a 3-to-1 return on that than to sell products at a 4-to-1 revenue return when that is a 20% profit margin. So there's a number of scripts available which you can actually implant into Google, which can override that, which can actually help you optimize for profit rather than just revenue. So instead of the standard ROAS return, they call it a POAS return, which is a profit on ad spend. So all that does, it sounds like a small tweak, but it's such an important tweak. It takes all your products, obviously requires your manual input into understanding what the profit margins are on different products, but it takes all your products and essentially applies a profit to it, and then you can optimize for profit rather than for just revenue return.
When do you know when to switch to a profit over revenue? Do you need to start all of your campaigns out with a revenue based, and then they've optimized for that, and then I'm like, okay, now I want to switch over now that I know that I'm more profitable in these pockets? Or am I going straight off the bat, and am I going straight into a profit based into a pass?
I've so seldom seen any stores do this to go for profit optimization as opposed to revenue optimization, but it makes sense for everyone off the bat to do this, with the only exception where it's just not necessary, where if all your products have more or less the same profit margin, this is just a duplication of that. There's no real requirement to do that. But if you have a number of different products, each with their own varying profit margin, it for sure makes sense to do it off the bat. Otherwise, you're living in the space of revenue vanity, which doesn't make sense. And again, you're just giving Google false signals of which to optimize. At the end of the day, I think for most businesses, profit is the only thing that matters.
Yeah. Well, I think for anything, profit is the only metric that matters. Am I going to be able to pay my bills next month, or am I going to be in the arrears? I think a really important note here is you have to be as transparent as if you were with an auditor when you're telling Google about all of your signals. You need to say, I realistically, and this is exactly what I achieved, and then Google can go and optimize. If you're going after vanity metrics in this stage, you are going to fail. Google will call out your bullshit and they will not be able to help you. It's as simple as that. Now you've got your tracking, and now you're prioritizing the right metric. Finally, what is the last thing that you can optimize, Mikey?
So the last one, and this I've seen out of all these three items, this one I've seen at least happen the most or the most frequently. But there's still probably the majority of stores that don't do it. Where okay, just have to wait for that cross driver to go. So where in the old days, one should spend the majority of their time within their Google Ads account. These days, you should maybe not spend the majority, but you should at least spend a large portion of your time in your Merchant Center account, because the feed optimization or spending enough time on optimizing your merchant feed is as important, if not more important, than optimizing what's in your Google Ads account. So seldom you will upload products on your website with Google in mind. So in terms of the title descriptions, the product nuances, the things you're mentioning on it, and even less the time people are spending time thinking about what are users searching. So often you'll have like SKU numbers in there, which have no value to the user in terms of search, from a searching standpoint.
Yeah, almost from an
Your feed
SEO, you can kind
optimizer.
of treat it as an SEO perspective. If people aren't searching for SQL numbers. Maybe some people are, but then you can have it slightly lower. You don't want that in your title because no one's going, I want 3x22776. We're not naming what's his name, shuttles, space, Tesla. What's his name, Michael? We're not
Must.
calling out Elon Musk's kids here. We're just we want
Yeah.
normal.
But I'll tell you what happens. It actually happens so often, particularly with stores with large volumes of products. They typically upload their products from an ERP system, and the ERP system has crazy, ID numbers or SKU numbers that which identify the products, and that's what lands up on Merchant Center. And one of the most important parts is are people finding your products? So I'll give you a very simple example that if you're selling ergonomic chairs, you want to make sure that ergonomic chair is in the title. And second to that, if you're selling a brand name product, you want to make sure that brand name is actually in your title description. Now, it's not necessary to go to your website and make your website title match what you want the user to search, although that can help in some instances. But what you want to do, you want to optimize your feed to match exactly what users will be searching. And there's so many wins to be had when you're optimizing your feed. So maybe I should share a quick example and just exactly on that.
Yeah.
So because it's quite hard to, I think, obviously if you're listening, it's that much more difficult. But this is my ergonomic chair example. And if you look at two merchants here, this is a great feed optimization. It will say exactly ergonomic, great, and then it will kind of try and get both wins from a home and office chair, meaning that if someone's searching ergonomic home chair, it's going to come up. If someone's searching office chair or office ergonomic chair, it's also going to come up. And it is that much more likely to get to the right user, as opposed to this chair where you have the color, which from a searchability point of view, probably not that important. More important to have that displayed on the website, but not from a merchant center point of view. But no capturing home users, only capturing office users, and no capturing ergonomic users at all. So it's not to say your product won't appear for a specific
Obviously
search
it
term.
does there, but it's really
Yeah,
not optimized.
exactly. So it's a
Paying
very
a lot more.
it's not the exactly title and description are not the only leaders, but they're such important influencers.
Yeah,
And so
I
few
think
guys spend time optimizing their merchant centers and their titles and descriptions of their products. And there's so many wins to be had just by doing that.
I'll deep dive into the nitty-gritty of Google Ads. This episode was packed with advanced techniques to help you maximize your Google Ads performance, and I hope you found it as valuable as we intended it to be. To recap, we covered server-side tracking, where we discussed how this method can future-proof your tracking by providing accurate data collection, even with the privacy restrictions and ad blockers that are coming up nowadays. We then went into profit on ad spend targeting, shift from return on ad spend to profit on ad spend, emphasizing the importance of optimizing for profit over revenue. And finally, we went into feed optimizations, where we explored the significance of optimizing your product feed in the Merchant Center, ensuring your titles, descriptions match the user's search behaviors for better visibility and performance. These strategies are designed to help you get the most out of your Google ad campaigns, especially if you're running PMAX campaigns for your e-commerce store. If you have any questions or need any further clarification on the topics we discussed, feel free to leave a comment down below. We'll be responding to absolutely every single one of them. Thanks for tuning into this technical episode of the Insight Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next Thursday.